Good morning, everybody. KT here with Wise Images Photography. And today what we are going to go ahead and do is we are going to go ahead and go over my camera settings for my Nikon D750. Now, this is obviously a older camera, came out in 2014, and if I'm correct, it was discontinued in 2018. My focus for today is going over these camera settings. Some of these camera settings can apply to the camera that you are using, so that I'm hoping that you get the most out of your camera. This camera is my go-to camera for whether I'm shooting nature, wildlife, whether or not I am doing like a senior session or a headshot or branding. When I was doing corporate events, this was my go-to camera for my weddings, special events, corporate events, all that kind of fun stuff. So this is really a fantastic camera. It is a workhorse. I have beaten this thing up, I have dropped it, and it just still keeps on ticking. So let's get going. Let's go ahead and look at the outside of the camera. First, there's a lot of stuff that's going on here. I am going to be talking mainly about just basic settings to kind of give you a baseline, and depending on what I'm shooting does depend on some of my other settings, but this should give you a good baseline to get you started. First up, we have our dials. We have our command dial, and then on the front we have our sub command dial. I want to say that I really like having the two dials because it makes it very easy to just, flip through whatever I needed to flip through in regards to like my shutter and my aperture. I'm able to use the two dials so I can go ahead and flip through my shutter speed, and then I can also flip through my aperture, which is really nice. On my other camera, I have an even older camera. It's a D750, and that one, it's like I have to press a button on the top and then try to hit the dial at the same time, and it's just really not very user friendly. So I really do like having the two dials that I have here on the D750. Looking at the top of my camera, I shoot in manual, and depending on what I'm shooting, really depends on what my shutter speed is going to be, what my aperture is going to be on, and then also what is my ISO going to be on. I plan on making other videos that go a little bit more in depth on what I shoot and my different settings for the different types of genres that I work on. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and look at the top of this camera. When you look right here, I have my metering button. And when I click on this, you can tell that, well, you can even tell right now it's in matrix mode. But when I click on it, if I want to change it, I can. And what I can do is when I click that command dial, you can see that it has changed right here. And so basically you have options of, let me go ahead and hit this button. When it has the asterisk, it is a highlight weighted metering. Then I have spot metering, and then I have center weighted metering. But like I said, I tend to always leave it in matrix, and I really haven't varied that far from it. Next up is my exposure compensation, which is this button right here. When I click on it, you can see that when I change my command dial, that it does change right here. I tend to go ahead and leave mine in 1+1 because I find that I don't have to boost as much in post later on, and it allows me to go ahead and not shoot in such high ISOs. Now I have unassigned this record button when I'm using video, and I've actually made my shutter button my record and focus button because I like just having to hit one button for both, since my finger is already there, as opposed to hitting this button and then trying to switch over to another button. So I just find it easier to just have the one button, doom doom, and then you're good to go. Looking at my mode dial, I have manual, aperture priority, shutter priority, and program auto, and a few other modes. I have automatic, no flash scene. These are user presets, and then I have effect. Now I really don't use these. I basically keep my camera in manual mode about 99% of the time. When I'm doing portraits, I change my release mode to single, which is down here. Let me see, maybe adjust that a little bit. I have single. And then I also have CL, which is continuous low, and that is about 3 frames per second. And then I have CH, which is continuous high, which is about 6 frames per second. And that's normally what I shoot in when I'm doing nature stuff. I do have a Q for quiet mode, and then a QC for QC for continuous quiet. But I did test them out and I really found that they didn't make much of a difference in sound level, so I don't use them. And then I have the timer, and I'm going to go a little bit more into that a little bit later. And then I also have the M up, and I really don't use that, but apparently the M up is the mirror up, and it's to help you out when you're doing telephoto or like, you know, macro photography, and help with the blur image, or with keeping images from getting blurry. My apologies about that. All right, so in front of the camera, you have your preview and your function button. Now I have assigned them before for various tasks, but my fingers are a little too short to wrap around. See, it was just not very user friendly for me. And so I really didn't like them. So I kind of unassigned them and haven't really used any of these buttons that I have in the front, because it's just not user friendly for me. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the back of the camera. On the back of the camera, you have your play button to be able to play back your images. You also have your delete button. Now I tend to leave this one alone when I'm in the field, because I don't want to make it a habit to delete stuff while I'm in the field, because I might accidentally delete something that I don't want to delete. Over here on the right, I have my AEL and AFL button. And I've actually gone ahead and assigned this to be my back button focus button. All right, so if I hit white balance, what happens here with white balance is that I can change with the sub command dial. I can change through my different settings, like if I'm shooting with flash or tungsten or whatever, you know, I can pick which level of temperature I want myself, shade from a building, or you're just shooting in a cloudy day or whatever. I tend to actually go ahead and leave mine on cloudy all the time. The reason why is because it tends to warm up your images, and I've also found that my skin tones come out a lot nicer. Now when I'm inside, I will choose the setting accordingly to what I am inside. But you can also change using the sub command dial. You can go ahead and change the temperature as well. But when I'm shooting on cloudy, you can make it colder or cooler, or you can go ahead and make it a little bit more warm. But I tend to leave it right here in the middle. Also too, with this particular button, if you have, like, if you've highlighted something inside the menu, and you see over here on the left, you see a little question mark, you can go ahead and hit the question mark, and then it will tell you what is going on with that particular part of the menu. So if you're kind of lost, that's kind of a nice help feature there. If you're in playback mode, you can go ahead and lock an image. I tend not to do this, but I don't see any problem with doing it, but I just don't do that. Now, the next button that we're going to go ahead and discuss is going to be your quality. And this has to do with what is your image size? What are you shooting with? Now, I shoot in RAW, but let's say, for example, and then you can change it by using, you know, your sub command or your command dial, and you can go into all the different ones like raw, fine, and this and that and everything. But basically I normally leave it in RAW. Now, another mode that you might want to go into might be JPEG. Let's say, for example, you know, you're just out and about with, you know, your kids, your family or whatever, and you don't really want to do a lot of post-production on it. You can always go ahead and put it into fine, and then you could pick your image size by changing your sub command dial, like small, large, you know, medium, whatever size you want, depending on what you're going to do. So, I mean, if you're going to print it up bigger, then go larger. If you're not, you know, just make it smaller. But I mean, that's an option if you don't want to sit there and have to process everything. But I always shoot mine in RAW. Now, the next one is my, and then also too, when you're in playback, if you hit this, it zooms you in. All right, and then we're going to go down here to the ISO button, and basically it's also goes backwards for you as well. It's the subtraction for the magnifier. But let's say, for example, that I'm in this particular setting. I know that you can program some buttons on the top for the ISO, but I am fine with it right where it's at. So basically, when I move my command dial, if my ISOs are off, I can go ahead and control my ISO. setting, and I'll set it according to the scene. Now, if I'm shooting birds or something like that, I tend to put it on, and then that way the ISO setting is picked by my camera. I find that if I'm shooting in one direction, you know, and then I change directions, it's nice to just have the auto ISO on because it picks which direction it wants to go, or it sets accordingly for the lighting when I've already picked what aperture and what shutter speed that I want when I'm photographing the wildlife. All right, so the next button that we're gonna go over is the I button. So when you hit it, it pops up a menu. So if you are finding that you can't find some items in the normal menu, this is where you might find it. Here we have choose image size, so I'm gonna hit OK. I'm gonna have mine on full frame, but you can have it down to a crop sensor if you want, but I have mine on full frame. I personally have set, one time I changed, I used to be like neutral on my set picture control, and then I set it to vivid just to see what it did. I liked it personally. But I've read some things that kind of contradict what I thought maybe it did. So I'm actually going to start shooting in flat because apparently I can get more dynamic range. And so that's what I'm going to do. I don't do anything with this one. The remote control, I do have a remote control, but I use the timer, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that a little bit later on. And then, like I said, some of these buttons, I don't have them assigned, the preview and the function, because I can't reach them. And then, but I do have my AEL and A, oops, that just went out of focus. I have my AEL and AFL button. I have it focused as the AF on button so that way I can do back button focus. So that's it for the eye. Let's go ahead and go into our menu settings. All right, so let's go ahead and start up on the top here. All right, for playback, you have your delete. It goes into, when I go into the computer, it's the D750. Playback display options. Something that I found is kind of cool is if I have focus point checked off, it allows me to kind of see where did the camera actually focus, and then I have the RGB histogram. So you hit OK to that. I don't have anything there. Image review is on. After you delete, this is your preference, whether you want it to skip forward or go backwards. All right, slideshow, nope. Okay, so that's about it for that particular one. When I look at the photo shooting menu, you know, I pretty much left that there. The storage folder, I kind of left it as it was. The file naming, now this one is a little, I think this one's important because let's say, for example, you shoot with different cameras. You want to know what camera is having like an issue. So like if this one had a dust spot, because it's named KT1, I can go, oh, look at that, that's a KT1 image, there's a dust spot on it. Now I know that this is the camera that needs to be fixed. And so that's kind of good if you have like a second camera, maybe, you know, KT2 or KT3 or whatever number camera it is. That way, if there is some kind of issue, you can pinpoint where it's at. The role played by my card basically is going to back up, image quality raw. I make sure it's the large, I have it on large size, but it doesn't really matter unless I'm on JPEG. And then the image area and compression, I kind of leave all that alone. White balance, I change it the other way. Setting picture control is, I've changed it to flat because I'm gonna try that out. The color space, the default is sRGB. There is a lot to go on with sRGB versus the Adobe RGB, but I find that sRGB is just fine for when I'm doing my photography, and I don't really mess with the active delighting or the vignette control or pretty much any of the other ones because I control them through my other little buttons over there. All right, so let's go ahead and go into the movie mode. File naming, once again, KT1, because this is the first one. Where does the video get recorded? It gets recorded on the first slot because I have two slots over here. And then the frame size is going to be the 1920 by 1080, 60 frames progression. And then I have movie quality high, micro sensitivity is on a 5, frequency spot is wide, wind noise, I put that on because if you have wind going through the area, you don't really want it on your camera. But I do also have, a lot of time I use this for B-roll, so I really don't use the audio here, but I do also have a Rode microphone that I can stick on the top if I want to. Image area, I have it as FX, and then I have my white balance again on clouding, picture control, and I think we've already went through that one. Yep, we did. There we go. All right, ISO norm, this is norm. Your settings are the movie ISO settings. I have it to mode on 100, and then ISO is on, and then 8000 as the maximum sensitivity when it comes to the video. And right now I'm not using time-lapse photography, so that is off. All right, so what you're gonna notice with this one, when you go into your custom settings, you'll notice that it has like different colors. And so now I'm gonna start all the way on autofocus and I'm gonna work my way through, and you'll find that, you know, you don't have to like bounce out of this and then bounce into it and then come back over here. You know, this is just kind of like a good starting spot in case you didn't want to flip through every single menu. So here we go. Let's look at the autofocus. You have AFC and AFS, so you have continuous or single. Basically, I like to have mine on focus. The reason why is because I want to know when I take a shot that it's going to be focused on something. It might be the wrong thing, but it's focused on something. Some people do like release because they want it to go off whether it is in focus or not. So that's really up to you. All right, I have this on a 4 for my focus tracking lock on. Focus point display, manual focus mode is off. I tend to use autofocus. You have your dynamic range on, and then group autofocus display. Focus point illumination, I have it on automatic at this time. Focus point wraparound off. I've never really even touched that before. All right, so your number of focus points. I have it on AF11. The reason being is there's twofold here. If you read your manual, it will tell you for AF51, autofocus 51, that you want to go ahead and use this for when you're shooting an object that you have no idea where it's going, because it has more focal points that it can pick from. If you're shooting a single object, then it's going to tell you AF11, because then it only has 11 autofocus points that it can go ahead and focus on. So why is it as a bird photographer that I'm choosing AF11? Well, the reason being is when I have 51 focal points, it basically kind of confuses the camera because now it has a lot of different focus points that it can focus on. So if the bird's flying through trees or this or that, it tends to confuse the camera, and then it doesn't know whether or not to go on the trees, or it doesn't, you know, whether it's the bird or the object or whatnot. And so I find that it kind of confuses the camera. It gives the camera way too many different options. And so that is why I go ahead and pick AF11, because it gives the camera less points to have to focus on. And I find that I have a better keeper rate with AF11. All right, so store points by orientation, I have that off. Built-in AF Assist Eliminator. Now I have it on. This is to help you like in low light situations, but it might just depend. I mean, some people, like if you're at a wedding or something, you know, maybe if it's an intimate scene, you don't want the light going off and on, but I found when people were dancing, they really didn't care. There were so many strobes going on, it didn't matter. But use that to your discretion, because maybe there might be like a corporate event that you're shooting, and having that light on might impede and kind of intrude on your client. So when we go ahead and look here, we have our ISO sensitivity step value at 1/3, the EV steps for exposure at 1/3, easy compensation is off, matrix metering is on, center weighted area is at 12, and then I don't even mess with this fine-tune optimum exposure. Going into our timers and AE lock, the shutter release button is off. It's off because I've set the AEL, AFL button to my back button focus, so that's why that is off. The standby timer is at 30. Now this is my self timer, and this one is the one that when you come up here and you've gone ahead and you set it to timer. Now, the timer delay is by 2 seconds. You can change this and you can change it to 2, 5, 10, or 20 seconds. So like if I'm doing astrophotography, I'm going to probably set it to a delay of 2 seconds. If I'm going to be jumping into the shot myself, I might set it to 20 seconds so that it gives me time to get into position. The reason why is because when you're doing astrophotography, as soon as you hit your camera, as much as you try to not like hit it and make it move and stuff like that, there is going to be some type of shake. And so that's why you want to go ahead and set a timer, get your focus, take the shot, and then hands off the camera and let it do its thing. If I am doing astrophotography, I remember that I have to change it to 1 time because I want it to take a shot, I want to be able to look at the shot, and then I want to make a decision if I want to do it again. If I'm going to be in the picture, I'm going to go ahead and up that to 4, 5, 6, how many ever shots I want. Sometimes I'll set it up to 9 because sometimes even 20 seconds is not enough time for me to move. So it takes a couple of shots on my backside, and then and then I get into position, and then it takes a shot. So there you go. You can also set your intervals between the shots. So if I'm wanting a little bit more time between the shots so that I can like change positions or whatever, I'll put it on 3 shots. Otherwise, you know, if you want it to go faster, you can do that too. All right, so now that is that for your self timer. I don't mess with this one. Remote on duration ML3, I don't do anything with that. The beep I turned off simply because like if you were in a quiet setting, wildlife, or if you're in a corporate event or something and you don't want to make a lot of noise, the beep is off. My continuous low, I set it to 3. Max continuous release at 100. Exposure delay is off. My flash warning is on. File number sequence is on. View grid display. Now this one, I have it off, but if you're looking and using and learning how to do the rules of 3, or the rules of 3, the rules of third, you may find the view grid kind of helpful. Easy ISO is off. Informational display is on auto. LCD illumination off. This MBD16 battery type, basically you can leave it right here in the default setting, depending on what you're using for, like if you put like a battery pack or something like that, that would make, you know, the difference between what you choose here. And then you would also, the battery order would be, what would you pick first? You know, like, are you using that EL15 battery or not? My flash sync, I just leave it at 2/50th a second, flash shutter speed at 1/60th. This is for all my settings for when I do use, you know, like on camera, my external flash up here on the top. I can also control with the command feature as well, where I pop up the flash itself and use the infrared system. Exposure compensation for flash, really, I haven't really messed with that one too much. Modeling flash, I've just left it on. I haven't really messed with this, and bracketing order, I haven't messed with that. This OK button, this is probably one of the nifty features that I really like, is if I hit OK, I've hit the playback mode to kind of jump into zooming in here. When I hit OK, I've put it to zoom on and off, and what I've set it to is I've set it to 1:1. And the reason why I've done that is because when I'm in my playback mode, instead of me having to go hit, 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 right? What I've done is I hit the button once for OK, and it jumps right into my shot. And I really like that. That is what I do with the control there for the OK. All right, this one, we know that I don't set these anymore, my AEL and AF button. So you have a couple different ways to get to some of these items. You'll notice that some of it kind of seems to overlap again. You can customize your dials if you want. I left them in default. My release button to use dial, I have it as off. Then I also have the slot empty release. Now this one, I've actually locked it. And the reason being is I don't want to take a shot, boom, and then all of a sudden I go to take a shot and there's no memory card in there. So I went ahead and put that to lock. If you want to change the way your metering looks in your camera. You can reverse your indicators if you would like to. Here I've de-assigned that record button here. This one I haven't really touched. The remote I haven't touched. Assign FN. Here we go again. Now we're in the movie settings, right? And I just kind of unassigned everything. Assign the AEL, AFL button, assign the shutter button, and it records the movies, and it also does all of the focusing. All right, we're back up at autofocus, so we've gone through all of the different settings that they have. And then over here you have where you format your card, save your user settings, reset user settings, monitor brightness. I did in the past, I did adjust this once and tried to make what I was seeing at my house on my computer monitor the same as the monitor brightness here, and I did the same with the color balance, trying to kind of match up the two monitors together, but I eventually kind of didn't do that anymore, and I just kind of used the histogram to make sure that everything's a-okay. You can clean your sister maybe your sister needs a cleaning. You can clean your sensor, and then also too, you can lock your mirror up whenever you need to go ahead and clean it. You know, do the more deep cleaning on your sensor. Make sure that you do have a full battery when you go to do that. Anyways, I have not messed with the, oh, there we go. The image, dust off ref photo, I've never messed with that. The rest of this stuff, you know, pick your language, auto rotation off. Let's see here. Copyright information, I would make sure that you turn that on. I have my information here that so that it has my name, it has my nickname, it has my real name, and it also has the my company name as well. And then moving right along, you can save settings, and you just have a lot of other things that I haven't messed with. Moving right along, retouch menu, I have not really touched anything in here, but maybe one time when I first got the camera, I was just kind of goofing off, but other than that, I've never really messed with anything. Moving down, you can go ahead and make my menu. You know, I think it's great that it's there, but do I use it? No, because you can add in what are some of the things that you use on a regular basis. I kind of personally find that all these buttons that are here on the outside, I tend to find them quite useful and I like them, and so I didn't really feel the need to change a lot with this particular camera. I think it works out great. So after showing you guys everything that is in my D750, and as I was making this video, I really realized that I don't utilize a lot of the things that are in this camera, but that is okay. It makes me want to start playing with my camera a little bit more and trying to dive in a little bit more, because it seems like maybe I'm not using all the features that I possibly could be using. I hope that you found this useful and it helps you maybe think about some things that maybe you might want to, you know, investigate in on your own camera. Maybe it does do the same thing. You know, before we go for the day, there was one setting that I forgot to go over when we were in our photo shooting menu here. It's the IS sensitivity settings. So when I go in here, you know, because I kind of had said to you guys that basically, you know, I changed my ISOs with this, which is true, but what I found with my Nikon D750 is that if I shoot above a 10,000 ISO setting, I can't seem to recover the image. So I actually set this ISO setting to 10,000 as a maximum. That way when I take it into like AI Topaz, I can get back the information, because I found once I hit 12,500 ISO, there was just like no recovering from that. So I did actually set my maximum sensitivity to 10,000. So check it out, see if your camera has the same thing too. I want to say thank you so much for tuning in today. Please make sure you go ahead and like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so that way you don't miss any of their future episodes. We like to go ahead and talk about nature, photography, and go on fun-filled ventures. And by doing those things, you let me know that you guys want me to keep this content coming. Let me know which tip you found the best for you in the comment section below. I want to just let you know you are awesome. Have an awesome rest of your week, and I will see you later, alligator.